brother Gordon. I'm supposed to be a writer, but this is one of the toughest things I've ever had to write about, losing Bobby. Remember, I'm 3.5 years older than you. Those were the words I heard to keep a kid brother in place. He'd always remind me that he was top dog. To others, he might be Bob or Mr. Feely, but to me, he was and will always be Bobby. An early picture of him in a kiddie car looks just like our dad, proudly grinning in a circa 1919 Roadster. Like father, like son, they say. Dad had started out in advertising with the Franklin Motor Car Company. They had only the air-cooled engines in cars back then. When father started his own advertising agency, Franklin was one of his first clients. He later joined Avon Products. Bobby liked to recall being in New York with him when he came up with that well-known slogan, "Ding dong, Avon calling." Cars became a big part of Bobby's life. There were Ford Model Ts and As. The one I remember best was a 1934 convertible. Beautiful. It was his, and I got the rumble seat. Then, there was a 1939 Ford convertible sedan. You see one like it in films showing Franklin D. Roosevelt riding around waving to crowds. In later years, Bobby collected some old beauties. I'm talking cars here. An early Franklin, of course, and then there was a special Buick that had been the personal car of a cardinal or someone high up in the church. It even had a glass partition between the driver and passenger area. With his knowledge and interest in automobiles, he could have been a fantastic salesman, except for one thing. He was too honest. And I remember later in life, Grandpa loved his Cadillacs. He used to have a red 1970s Cadillac Eldorado that he stored at our house, much to my father's chagrin. And he would drive up to Kent from New Milford on a regular basis to take it out driving around. And when he and Grandma finally moved to Georgia, he was finally the proud owner of a huge white boat of a Cadillac. And although he protested when his driving privileges had been taken away, I think that he secretly liked being chauffeured around in his big white Cadillac. It made him feel very important. Trains were another love. Our grandfather, J.D. Feely, was a railroad man with the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas line, better known as the Katy. Maybe that's what got Bobby started. From his childhood Lionel train sets to the present, he was a big booster of railroad travel. Amtrak, take note, he has been pitching for you. And those of you who knew him know that he always talked about how much he loved traveling by train. And I remember any time that we talked about traveling anywhere, he would say, "I fly Amtrak." In fact, anything that took his fancy, he would let people know, be it the president or other politicians. Most anybody, if they thought they needed his insight, he would fire off a letter. And he wrote to anybody and everybody, and he always loved to talk about the letters that he had received from George H. Bush and Barbara Bush, 2 separate letters, because he had written to send them his condolences when their dog died. Another was love of his country. Bobby was a member of the Greatest Generation. He served in World War II. First as a chaplain's assistant on a troop ship to Europe. You may have seen pictures of the GIs rolling dice in the onboard craps games. Bobby didn't gamble. He rented out the dice from one of the chaplain's board games, and he came out ahead. Later, he was assigned to the Valley Forge Military Hospital, where he worked with the blind. More recently, he would visit hospitals and nursing homes, leading sing-alongs with that beautiful Irish tenor voice. Music was always a big part of his life. A lover of the big band era, a lover of music, that is. He started with the saxophone, but that Irish tenor, gorgeous. And my younger brother, Rory, started playing drums when he was probably 5 years old, and he's now a senior at the Berklee School of Music, and he credits Grandpa with instilling in him a love of music and encouraging him to stick with it. And as many of you probably know, Grandpa never met a karaoke machine that he didn't like, and we've had the pleasure of hearing him perform many times with the karaoke machine and at many of the grandchildren's weddings. One of my my favorite memories is that when I was 7 or 8, I received a cassette player for my birthday. It was one of those old flat square ones from the early 80s that just had a little tape player in it and you could record. And when I opened it up in the player, there was a tape of Grandpa singing As Time Goes By, which I can still hear. But his greatest love was his family. His first love, his wife, Kay, who on a regular basis he would refer to as his child bride. His children, Diane, Robert Jr., Kathleen, and Julie. His 8 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. He kept in touch with his brothers and sisters and was always there during our mother and father's final years. He really cared. Others always came first. From the curly little redhead in the paddle car roadster to the no longer so curly whitehead in his 90s, he will be remembered. Goodbye. We love you, Bobby. So we want to extend a great thanks to Gordon again for such a beautifully written tribute. And our family would also like to extend loving thanks to all of Grandpa's extraordinary caregivers for their years of loving and loyal service. Judy, Dorothy, Edith, Brittany, Trish, and Carolyn. And a special thank you to Uncle Bobby for always making sure that Grandpa received communion after he could no longer leave the house to attend Mass here at St. Teresa. My grandfather was a truly special man. He had a great love for everyone and everything. From his family and friends, to the little boy who recently came to mow his lawn, to his many beloved pets, to the birds and squirrels for whom he set up an elaborate feeding station behind his house. That love was returned to him 100-fold. I don't think I've encountered another person in my life that so many people had such a reverence for. And I don't think I ever will. I'm so grateful for the 34 years I got to spend with him. Goodbye, Grandpa. We love you and miss you terribly.